just wondering what the shops look like in the peri-urban and rural areas compared to the urban area. Is it that there aren't Maggi noodles in those shops to choose from, or that they're there and people are passing them over?
So I'll answer you with an example. In Suva, there is a full-scale grocery store on every corner. In the downtown, like central downtown core, where I showed those skyscrapers, they're definitely Western style, really fancy. It was almost heartbreaking when they built the new MH because it was so westernized. But there's huge variability. So once you get out of the extreme downtown corridor, you still have full-scale grocery stores. They don't differ at all from the shops, the grocery stores in Reki. They're full-scale. They have everything you would want. They have ice cream. They have Maggi noodle. They have soda. They have everything, puja items. And once you get really far out, like this past summer, we worked in Kandavu Island. And in Kandavu, in the village I was living in, there are no roads connecting it to anywhere. And the boat would come once in a week and drop off supplies for the shop. And it was a little tiny shop run by the Reverend's wife. And it had soap, it had matches if you were lucky, it had 10 fish, that kind of thing. You would actually have to get in the boat and go around to the airport, where the airport was, to actually access any real level of store-bought goods. Yet even there, people still have Maggi noodles and 10 fish. It's amazing. They don't have matches, but they'll manage to get 10 fish instead of, catching a fish. And it's much easier. It's even easier for me to catch a fish than to get 10 fish. So any Fijian woman could, catch 10 fish. Does that fully answer your question, though? Yeah. It's also kind of an interesting thing because the farther you get out from the city, the more expensive food gets. So even in Reki on the north part of the main island, which is 2 hours from Nandi, where the international airport is, food has a premium of about 30 to 50 cents on any item. When you get out to Kandavu, you're talking about doubling in price. So, yeah.
I'm just wondering whether there could be something about presenting your status to the village going on, that you can afford to buy this fish. And another thing, what role does the child's choice play in this? I mean, is it the children who say, oh, but our neighbors have these fancy noodles and I want them?
So I'm going to answer that in two components. And the reason is that the work I've been doing recently is in the village with indigenous people. But the data I've shown you are from the Indian population. In terms of high status foods in the village, on Sundays, there's always a feast prepared, and it's prepared generally for the preacher at the Methodist church and a few families that are invited. And the process of doing this rotates between families in the village. And it is the most important thing in terms of status. And they never serve canned fish. They'll actually, if they have a particularly good day or if they know that their turn is coming up to cook, they'll organize their time to make sure that they catch a nice big fish. Or in Kandavu, we had crabs like this on Sundays. It's never store-bought food. So at least with indigenous people, there may be some status elements that I don't know about yet, but it doesn't seem to be purely motivated by status. With Indo-Fijian people, it's an interesting thing. Some of that is, I think, motivated by status kind of / cultural norms. When you go into any Indo-Fijian person's house, they immediately want to give you juice and a snack. And this is something that it would have been tea and maybe some type of small baked good or something at a previous time, maybe even some dried peas or something like that, buja. Now it's usually Fanta, if you're lucky, it's Fanta, and some sort of biscuits, what we would call cookies. And so there is an element of appropriate, hey, look what I can serve you kind of thing. It's not just tea, even though most of us would much prefer to have tea in someone's house. And if Fanta is not available, if they don't have the money to buy a big bottle of soda, then it's going to be something like the local version of Tang, which is bought in really, really concentrated, syrupy form and then diluted. And you can sort of, that is definitely an indicator of economic status, because they'll have to dilute it quite a lot if they can't afford to buy a lot of it. But that still accounts for kind of a small amount. In terms of the rest of it, if an Indo-Fijian invites you over for dinner, they will serve you really nice curry, homemade flatbread, and maybe even really complicated types of flatbread. So yeah, maybe, but something to look into more. Yeah.
And what about the children's choice?
Children's choice. Some of the junk food is children wanting junk food, definitely. But children are also really motivated by eating other sweet things, like mangoes. Kids love mangoes. So some of that is going to be kids' choice. In terms of moms laying down the law, though, and saying that that's not healthful, that doesn't happen. It's usually everyone eating sort of the same thing. And little kids, especially among Indo-Fijians, will often forego a lot of what we would call real food, and they'll eat like dal bhat, just dal and rice, dal and rice, dal and rice, or Maggi noodles. But it's usually the mom that's saying, here, have some Maggi noodles. It's easy, just take it, go. And interestingly, Indo-Fijian kids cook Maggi noodles like we do. Fijian kids just take the dry noodles, smash them up, and eat them like chips. It's terrible. Yeah. Thanks.
It's something that seems to be, you have to be 8 years old to think this is, because my daughter thought it was great.
Maybe. I'll try it. That was fun.
So that slide where you have the two diets.
Yeah.
So the snacks, the huge amount of these packaged snacks that
Yep.
they're getting, so is that because parents, are kids buying these? Are people giving money to kids to buy their lunch, and they go out and buy mixed food? They don't buy
It's
a piece of fruit? Is that what's going on?
That's definitely going on, and there are actually women who make their entire household budget from setting up a little snack shop next to schools. And a lot of schools, kids either bring their lunch. For Indian kids, it's usually a little roti parcel, a little flatbread with some leftover curry wrapped up in it. But after school, they load, and it's not just buja. If it was buja, that would be okay. Buja is like those little lentil flour crackers and peas that you maybe have had. It's stuff like bongo.
Yeah, bongo.
Really the worst kind of potato chips.
My daughter loved that too.
Yeah, kids love bongo. And it's not a little bit, it's like a lot. And we did actually collect package size on all of this. And kids are shockingly good at knowing how, recalling what size pack they had, because they know exactly how much it cost. Yeah. So, and those sorts of things are available everywhere. Maybe not in the shop in Kandavu that has no roads, because it's never going to make it there, but everywhere else.
So were the recalls done with the kids? Or
Kids and moms in conjunction, and we tested the method for very little kids. We were very skeptical that they could recall, but the mom was right there, and she would sort of redirect them or tell us, no, it was this. And we had, appropriate. In fact, we had to change our utensils with Fijians because even the dishware between the two communities is completely different. So
you brought different size dishes and stuff, and then said you with this much rice or this much rice?
yeah, we always have a whole kit of things we have to lug around. We have our anthropometric materials, but we also have a whole diet recall kit. And with the Indo-Fijians, there's a big store in Fiji called Rupp's Big Bear. It's yellow. Have you not seen Rupp's? Rupp's Big Bear. It's a bright yellow building with bright blue awnings and stuff, and that's where everyone buys their stuff. It's kind of like Fiji Walmart. And they buy certain types of ceramic bowls, and they also buy those little Indian containers that you get like curry in here. And they're set sizes, so we had the right sizes, we had the right bowls, and we had serving spoons of all the available kinds. And it's actually a surprisingly narrow possibility, a universe of serving utensils. Yeah, and it made it much, much easier. We actually were measuring for Indo-Fijians, we took head circumferences, and so we used the insertion tapes for the roti size as well. So we would know if moms are making small ones, because Fijian women make a really big roti when they make it. So I'm pretty confident about that.
So do you have any indication about health outcomes for these kids? I mean, they have higher BMI, but are they?
Yeah, their BMIs are, in fact, there's a slide that I left in the end of this, past everything that might, so this is from a different talk completely, but the BMI Z-score, this is by, again, high embodied capital here is just a mean educational split for, this is a sum of parents in body capital, so it's moms and dads. And you can see that the urban women are still in the negative in the mean, but urban low embodied capital families and rural families are still trailing quite a lot. And reviewers always want me to articulate this much more. This is indicative of the transitional element of that. The transition happens variably, and so to think that if all of these kids were above 0, and this is, of course, BMI Z-scores based on Western standards, that would be that would be much more shocking to me. And there certainly are. There are kids in a Z-score range of 2 to 3. And these are just Indian kids again. Fijian kids are a bit heavier. We are having a real problem finding any underweight Fijian kids. So.
Yeah. So you're rural? Now, where are you working on the Fijian places where you're working? You showed us, but I can't remember.
Yeah, get back to it.
But not on the islands, not on the small islands. Oh, but you're in
Yeah, so the Indian population, the urban population is in Suva. That's where our urban Fijian population is as well. Indian rural is Reki, but for the Fijians, I actually isolated 3 different ecologies because you have the urban, the rural is out here in Kandavu, and you can fly to Kandavu if you have enough money, which is not something local people do. They have 2 or 3 dive resorts on Kandavu. Otherwise, the ferry goes once in a week, and if the weather's bad, the ferry doesn't go at all. So it's quite isolated, and no roads outside the airport area. So Kandavu is my very rural ecology, and then we're also working just about here in the Natasiri Highlands in 7 or so villages that are still traditional. They're extremely village traditional. The strictures on clothing and behavior apply. There's very, very little to no wage income. There are schools, so 1 or 2 people will be earning an income from government work or school work, but it's the nearest village or the nearest city access is actually Suva, even though you're right by Nausori where the airport is. The direct bus route takes you into Suva, which is it's 3 hours by taxi. And the roads are only paved up to a certain point past the government station to get to the villages we work in. None of the roads are paved. So there's bus service. There are a few shops in the government center, which is about 20 kilometers from the nearest village that I work in. And so I kind of isolated this as sort of almost like a peri-urban but still traditional because they're within reach of the urban core, though they're reaching it very infrequently. Yeah. Yes?
Have you considered doing stuff in the Asawas? Because they have to basically load up outboard boats and boat the stuff.
Yeah, in fact, the original research plan, you guys probably all know Joe Henrich, the Asawas are right up here, and Joe works toward actually it's the last island, it's the Asawa's the last one. Oh, well, you guys work there too. Joe had I'd spoken with him about maybe a collaboration for the really remote area because I didn't have contacts in a really remote village area when I was writing my proposal. I didn't really have that many contacts with the indigenous population at that time anyway. And we had planned to join forces for a little while out there, but which cyclone was it? Cyclone Destructo hit, really damaged the lab. I was actually in Fiji when I got word from Rob and Joe.
2008,
It was 2009. No, 2010. 2010. It hit in, I think, January of 2010.
Yeah.
Were you there in 2010?
I was around when this happened.
Yeah.
No, I guess we were there the following summer, so.
It would seem like it would be a good place to see, because if you're looking at costs and benefits,
Yes.
I think how costly it is to bring some of these canned
Yep.
foods over, into these items. But also
Kadabu is as remote and, is this, I think, yeah, I mean, so Kadabu is similar in many ways.
Yeah.
It's far
So-
away and hard to get to, and.
There are
stories.
resorts all through the Yasawas. Well, there's one resort on Yasawa, but it's not accessible to 99.9% of the people in the world. But there is a boat that leaves Nandi here and goes. It's a tourist boat, so it makes the circuit twice daily, once daily, twice daily. So you could actually make the argument that Kadavu is more difficult, more remote,
Expensive.
definitely more
Yeah.
expensive.
In and out, I like it.
We sat for 3 days in the airport trying to get there, tried to take the ferry, and we're told that the ferry wasn't going to go either because the weather was so bad. And that's what happens. You just sit and you wait. It's really, to be in a country like Fiji with a fairly reliable tourist infrastructure, considering the level of development in the country, it really kind of confirmed that we were going to the end of the earth. We also considered going out to Laos. But we thought actually that this might be so remote that we might be too far down the spectrum to get anything usable in terms of generalizing to outlying areas.
So in Australia, the food scarcity is really seasonal because of these similar sort of weather things, right, where the roads will just get completely cut off and the can't get in with the food. And the hunting patterns seem to reflect that, at least some of them do. So I'm wondering if the things like fresh fish versus canned fish and things like that, are there seasonal differences in people choosing those?
So I haven't looked at this data yet, so I can't give you a definitive answer on that. I can tell you that in Kadavu, the weather is, the village I lived in was called Soso. Soso is the Fijian word for mud. And it's called Soso for a reason, because it rains constantly. And so you have access to the ocean all the time. And women also forage for, there are a lot of waterfalls and a lot of rivers. So they have a lot of inland fish and prawns to forage for as well. And we ate tons of prawns and mud crabs from the mangroves. So in terms of getting things there, yeah. But I need to take a look at what was actually consistently available in the shop anyway, because it seemed like there was never anything in the shop. We actually went for about 4 weeks with only 8 matches in the whole village. And so we were like hoarding our 4 lighters because the other 4 had already walked off,
Yeah.
So the shop is just so poorly stocked that, yeah.
One of the problems in Misawa about shops was that a lot of people thought it was really bad to make a profit off your neighbors. I mean, it was a cultural problem.
Yeah.
So, well, problem, if it was a problem or not. But it reduced the motivation of anyone to run a shop since they didn't think it was okay to make any money. And so when we first were there, that was a strong idea, and there was nothing to buy. And then some more people were more comfortable with the idea of exploiting their fellow villagers, and now there's a rather nice little shop, which also suffers from vagaries in getting supplies in, because there's times when they don't get supplies in, and they don't get together, whatever.
Yeah, and you're going to find those vagaries all over Fiji, even in Suva, where you would think you would have fairly constant access to things. You do not. It's just such getting things to that country and then getting things through the country, unless you're literally someone who's vending at the market and you picked up produce and you bring it to the market yourself, is incredibly difficult in a variety of ways. In Kadavu, that's an interesting thing, because the woman that runs the shop now is not from the village. She's the preacher's wife, and she has personality traits that would not give her that level of conscience about making a profit. She she's an interesting woman. She was also very generous. She was the only woman that had an automatic washing machine. And even though there's no electricity in the village, there are a couple of generators. And part of our deal was that we needed to run the generator for a couple hours every night to charge our laptops and this and that. Her wash tub was in constant operation, and she was very generous. And these are extremely expensive and hard to come by. So she was very generous in a number of ways, but I don't think she had that level of conscience about things. In Vuisinga, where I spend most of my time up there, and in fact Lutu, which is down the road, it's the last village down the road, they both have shops. Lutu has a much nicer and much more well-stocked shop. And I've never picked up on anybody having any problems with that. In fact, I was learning to bake a certain kind of cake when I was in Vuisinga, and one woman has a little oven, right? And the village is electrified when the electricity works, and it's all metered now. And so she said, yes, you can use my oven, but the electricity costs this much. And she had a standard fare, and anyone that wanted to use the oven, she was very willing to let them use it, but you had to pay her. And it was a little bit of a premium above what the electricity cost. So I don't, maybe commerce is just more ingrained. And
I mean, there should be a big difference you expect between the Indo-Fijians and the Indo-Fijians based on what work they're doing in.
So these were all Fijian women, Fijians. But in Natasiri, the government station, there are 4 or 5 shops, slightly better stocked than the village shops. And they're all run by actually one extended Indian family who also runs the only taxi transportation service down the road, mixed race family.
Okay, any other questions? We will continue. Reminiscing about
Okay, great.
All right, let's thank Don very much.